The PlayStation 2 is the most popular game system ever produced, and with that popularity came a wealth of different games from every genre imaginable. Some of the all-time great horror games appeared on the PS2, including the debut of titles such as Fatal Frame, Onimusha Warlords, and Silent Hill 2 and 3. But there are many horror games that appeared on this legendary console that time has forgotten, hidden gems within the horror genre. In this video we take a look at 12 PS2 horror games that time forgot. Haunting Ground was released for the PS2 in 2005. We play as a teenager called Fiona, who after being involved in a car accident, mysteriously awakens in a castle dungeon. Fiona eventually manages to break free of her prison and befriends a dog called Huey.
Huey? So you're Huey?
This is a survival horror game produced by Capcom, the studio behind hit horror classics such as Resident Evil. And while Haunting Ground didn't live up to the high expectations set by its predecessors, it did manage to find a cult following thanks to its unique gameplay. Rather than fight enemies head-on, Fiona must use stealth to avoid them. When she does engage in combat, it is either done through the use of environmental hazards, or more commonly, by commanding her faithful companion Huey to attack while she makes her getaway. The game even took control away from players at times if Fiona became too stressed out, causing her to run off in whatever direction she pleased. While many of these ideas were indeed unique, they also made for a frustrating experience, which led to most people forgetting about this game over time. Cold Fear is a third-person horror action game set aboard a Russian whaler ship full of zombified crew, all mutated by a parasite known as the exocell. In order to kill these parasites, the victim's brain must be destroyed or they will reanimate. We assume the role of Coast Guard Tom Hansen, who becomes stranded and separated from his team, sent in to investigate the ship after radio contact was lost. The premise and survival horror gameplay are fairly by the numbers, but the early hours of Cold Fear and its ocean setting make for a very distinctive and entertaining horror game full of creepy moments. Aiming is often difficult as the ship constantly sways and bows on the ocean waves. Things even get so choppy that the player can be thrown overboard if they aren't careful. At the time, Cold Fear was unfairly compared to Resident Evil 4, one of the best action games of all time, and failing to look past this, many players ignored it and the game was a commercial flop. After blacking out, central protagonist Torque finds his wife and 2 children have been murdered and soon is arrested and charged with the crime. He finds himself on death row, held captive in the depths of an island prison. It is within this hellhole that the story of the suffering takes place. Upon entering the prison cell, an earthquake rocks the island and releases demonic monsters throughout the penitentiary. All of these monsters seem to be based on forms of execution, from the lethal injection right up to the electric chair. Torque must now battle his way out of the prison, all while haunted by the cries of his late family. The suffering has some genuinely scary moments and twisted creature designs. It even allowed players to switch between third and first person action on the fly, a rare concept back in 2004 when it first launched. The story of Torque's past is drip-fed via flashbacks during gameplay, and this made for an immersive experience which kept players on their toes, waiting for the next memory to take them by surprise as they explored Torque's nightmare. Kuon originated from developer From Software, who would later go on to become responsible for the successful modern game series Dark Souls. While most of From's games contain horror themes, Kuon was a full-blown horror experience from start to finish. The game was divided into 3 chapters: Ying, Yang, and Kuon. Each chapter featured a different character to control, with the story eventually tying all 3 together by its end. And each of these storylines focused on exploring the ancient Japanese horror known as Kaiden. Players explored a Kyoto mansion and the neighbouring temple by night, encountering all manner of hideous mythological creatures in the process, some plucked right from Japanese mythology. The creature design was often built around body horror concepts, and made for some frightening sights. To combat these terrors, players were given access to both melee and magic abilities. Sometimes we gain the ability to summon creatures who serve as bodyguards as we explore the temple grounds. Kuon certainly tried to be original in its concept and execution, however, not everything quite worked, and this made for a scary but often uneven game which has largely been forgotten. The X-Files was a popular science fiction show during the 1990s and beyond, however few people remember the spin-off games based upon it. One of the better games based on the X-Files was Resist or Serve, which launched for the PS2 back in 2004, a few years after the show's original run ended. Just like the show, we take on the role of two FBI agents, Mulder and Scully, as they investigate several paranormal goings-on within the town of Red Falls, Colorado. What made this such a great adaptation of the original X-Files show was the way the game actually expanded on events set within it. The timeline of the game is divided into 3 chapters, which take place between the 2nd and 3rd episode of the 7th season. It also featured the voices of the original cast.
And the people of Red Falls believe that Mandy and Caitlin Winslow are using black magic to, what? Raise the dead and create killer zombies?
Kids today, huh?
The game took on an old school approach to survival horror, with fixed camera angles to display the action. While many elements of Resist or Serve were pretty by the numbers, solving puzzles, fighting bosses, and the like, it did have a neat flashlight mechanic where the agents could use said light to locate objects around the environment, as well as stunning enemies to boot. Published by Sony themselves, Extermination was one of the first horror games to appear on the PS2, but even for its time, it was criminally overlooked. In it, players stepped into the boots of character Dennis Riley, who heads up a task force of soldiers sent into a military base in Antarctica to investigate a distress call. They discover a deadly virus has overrun the facility, transforming its inhabitants into bloodthirsty mutants. Extermination featured a number of interesting gameplay concepts, including an infection rate meter, which kept track of the player's infection level. If this becomes too high, then our health would drop until we found a medical station and vaccine to temporarily cure Dennis's ailments. The cold tundra surrounding the base also had an effect on Dennis as he explores, as we must keep warm to survive. Due to these brutal gameplay designs, Extermination was a very hard game to complete. However, it did feature a creepy atmosphere, novel game design, and a slick weapon customization system. For those reasons, it remains a cult classic in the horror community. Probably one of the scariest games available for the PlayStation 2, Forbidden Siren was a creation from the mind of original Silent Hill director Keiichiro Toyama. Siren is a stealth horror game where we take control of several different characters as they explore the haunted village of Hanuda, Japan. What separated Siren from other paranormal survival horror games of its time was the sight ability given to the player. By using this sight power, we can jack into the minds of nearby enemies to see where they are on the map in relation to our own character and the direction they are looking. This provides us with some genuinely unsettling moments, but is also essential to successfully navigating the terrain unnoticed. There's nothing quite like seeing through the enemy's eyes as they chase us down. Perhaps the most unnerving element of Forbidden Siren was the method in which facial animation was achieved. Real faces were superimposed onto the character models in place of traditional polygon animation methods, which made for some incredibly creepy and unnervingly realistic looking cutscenes that never felt quite right. Another horror game from Sony, Ghosthunter was a surprisingly advanced game for its day, featuring state-of-the-art visuals and high-end production values. It wasn't as scary as some of the other games on this rundown, but then again it wasn't really meant to be, taking a far more light-hearted approach to its over-the-top story of a detective who inadvertently releases a lab full of imprisoned ghouls while investigating a murder case with his partner. It is now up to the detective to hunt down and recapture all of these wandering spirits. He does this by travelling to several different ghost realms and blasting the malicious spirits into submission with a variety of weapons, before throwing out a capture grenade to trap them. It was kind of like the ghost hunting equivalent of Pokemon. Despite this unique hook, Ghosthunter never became the blockbuster hit its creators had hoped for, and is rarely mentioned years later. Created by Rockstar Games, a studio most famous for the Grand Theft Auto series, Manhunt is a game that simply couldn't exist these days. It focused completely on performing sadistic and very violent execution kills, which are secretly filmed by hidden cameras around the levels to make up footage for a snuff movie. A twisted filmmaker, known only as the director, pulls the strings from the safety of his off-site mansion. We take on the role of death row inmate James Earl Cash, who after being sedated wakes up in a random city full to the brim with the most violent and dangerous gangs known to man. These gangs hunt the player through the grimy depths of this abandoned city, and the only way to escape is to act out the grotesque fantasies of the director. The atmosphere is oppressive and grim, and the unrelenting violence and increasingly bleak storyline make this a highly disturbing game that was very nearly banned upon its release. An even more controversial sequel came and went, but these days Manhunt has largely been buried in the annals of gaming history. The only two-player game on this list, Obscure allowed players to team up via co-op mode and experience its haunted high school detective story together. The plot focused on a group of 5 students exploring the grounds of Leafmore High, where strange and unexplainable occurrences are abound. Soon it is discovered that school members are being transformed into monsters by the faculty, so of course it's up to our band of ragtag adventurers to save the day. Obscure featured music that was very of its time, with popular bands including Sum 41 appearing on the soundtrack. It wasn't highly acclaimed either, receiving mostly mixed review scores. Despite this, Obscure's mix of co-op gameplay, customizable weapons, and classic-era survival horror aesthetics allowed it to find a place within the hearts of horror fans at the time. Based on the cult 80s horror movie from visionary director John Carpenter, The Thing was more than a simple video game cash-in. This is in fact one of the PlayStation 2's greatest horror games, although you wouldn't know it as very few people seem to remember its existence. Following on from the events of the movie, players assume the role of a rescue team member, Captain Blake, investigating both the Norwegian and US outposts ravaged by the alien virus. In this respect, The Thing acted as a video game sequel of sorts, clearing up the movie's ambiguous ending. For those who don't know, The Thing is an alien life form capable of mimicking any creature by inhabiting their body and replacing it with an alien duplicate. This makes it very hard to know who has become a thing and who is still human. The developers used this concept to form an interesting gameplay mechanic known as the trust system. Just as it sounds, this trust system allowed players to monitor how suspicious their teammates were of them as the game progressed. If your fellow soldiers felt you may be infected, they will start treating you differently, failing to carry out orders and eventually trying to kill you. Of course, it's not just our fellow humans that pose a threat. The alien itself takes on many different forms as it spreads throughout the 2 outposts, and this led to many horrifying moments. Another horror game that features a teenage girl and a canine companion to aid her on her journey, Rule of Rose received much criticism from the European press due to the controversial themes of adolescence it explored. In fact, in the UK, Rule of Rose was banned outright. It did launch in a limited capacity elsewhere, however, but due to few copies releasing, it is now almost impossible to track one down. The game was heavily inspired by both Silent Hill and dark fairy tales and folklore. It was set in England during the year 1930 and featured a 19-year-old named Jennifer who becomes trapped in an alternate dimension ruled by cruel and vicious young girls. It is now up to Jennifer to appease this hierarchy known as the Red Crayon Aristocrats by offering up sacrifices. Of course, eventually it is Jennifer that ends up next in line to be sacrificed, and events continue to become darker from there. Its legacy makes it one of the most sought after PS2 horror experiences amongst hardcore fans, but for everyone else, it is simply another game that time forgot. And with that, we come to the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, remember to leave a like, comment down below, and of course subscribe for more horror related content. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.